right, what's up everybody? This is Ryan here and you are watching episode 57 of my live stream Q&A. I'm actually like 2 minutes early for a change because I have so much stuff to talk about. I've got basically 3 different questions of, well, more than 3 technically, questions which were sent in ahead of time in the show. And I do super appreciate when people do send in the questions ahead of time. Unfortunately, it was a very busy week for me. I basically had to put everything on hold to spend about 36 hours over the past couple of days rebuilding a low-level PDF creation tool. So a lot of different things just got put on hold, and as a result, I'm not as prepared for this episode as I would like to be. Nevertheless, I'm going to try really hard to answer the questions that were sent in ahead of time, and we'll just kind of see where we go. But yeah, this particular episode is going to be very question-oriented. Also, if I look tired, it's because I am a little bit tired, so you'll have to bear with me. So yeah, anyways, let's get started with the usual stuff. First of all, welcome to Linksy, Cousin Victor, and Omar, the 2 of whom did send in questions ahead of time. So what's up, everybody? Good to see you. All right. So, yeah, so if you like what I do and would like to see me do it better, then please do consider supporting the show on social media. So we have a Google Plus account, we've got a Facebook account, we've got our Twitter account, and we have also a Slack group, which is like a developer chat group if you would like to get help from a talented community of developers, which is comprised of a lot more than just me. There's certainly better developers than me in that group, so do consider joining that if you'd like more specialized help. Also, as I kind of have to remind people, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time to help people personally outside of this live stream, so that really is the best place to get answers. I do try and respond to Facebook messages, at least to respond to them, but as far as like spending a lot of time one-on-one with people, I can really only do that if, you know, part of me feels bad saying this, but I really shouldn't because my time is important. But another way to support the show, and if you would like some more personal help, then another, like a extended help, then one way you can do that is through Patreon. So I do offer a reward for $50 patrons where you basically get an hour of my time every month to ask me about basically whatever you want, as long as it's, you know, let's keep it relevant to programming and personal development. And yeah, we have a Patreon page and also a PayPal account set up if you would like to contribute a little more directly. If you can't afford to do that, though, that's totally fine. Just do me a favor, hit the like button down below if you learned something, and consider subscribing if you haven't already. Anyways, 2 announcements. So number 1, as my regular viewers will know, I recently posted 2 videos which are pretty different from my normal content, and the idea behind them is there are certain topics which I've spent many years thinking about, and I have my own strong opinions about them, but I don't typically talk about them. Now, as some people have noticed, yeah, my perspectives do tend to bleed into my content in general. So I have talked about these topics to a degree when they do come up in the live streams and things. But basically these 2 videos, the video series is basically called Reflections. And the reason I call it that is just because it's me reflecting on some particular topic. It's not me telling you that this is the way things have to be. I'm really just talking about my experiences and dealing with different troubles and just different interesting topics that pretty much apply to everybody to some degree. So if you are interested in that kind of thing and you like those videos, please do me a favor and let me know, because that's one of the things I'm looking to do, is I'm looking to expand my content into more than just Android development. And one of the best ways for me to understand whether my new content is something you want or not is to leave a comment and hit the like button. So anyways, that's basically it. Thank you. And that's it for announcements. So let's get started. So like I say, I have 3 questions that were sent in ahead of time. So I'll probably do them sequentially unless I get other questions, in between that seem to make more sense to answer. But yeah, I'll do my best to answer these questions from our people who sent them in ahead of time. Okay. So this was a very interesting speculative question. So it is a little bit, we're going to have the, I'm going to throw up the big opinion-based modifier to this explanation. It's a speculative question. I'll explain why, but you kind of can't. Let me explain what the thing is, and then you'll understand what we can't do. So this was the question, and it was sent in by my friend, Mr. Taha. And Taha asks, thank you so much for the question. I'm really proud. So Taha asks, how can we make a flawless Android application that doesn't crash ever? I try so hard to do it, but it always strikes me. Sorry, let me just try. I try so hard to do so, but it always strikes at me with some fucked up exception that I don't know how to deal with. Oh yeah, language warning, by the way. So first and foremost, I am very proud, Taha, because I know that you're not from North America, and you are really starting to sound like a Canadian. This is excellent usage of the F word. Yeah, good work there. I'm sure a few people will be offended by that, but I am not, because I actually, just to digress for a moment, I'm used to working in kitchens and construction yards and sales floors, and I'm also a small town Canadian, so Canadians, we just typically swear quite a bit, particularly working class Canadians, which is what I am. So it warms my heart a little to see this perfect usage of the vernacular. Anyways, let's move on. So this was a very neat question. So the question, so how do we basically make applications or systems that don't ever crash? So let me pull up my notes and then we'll get started here. So the number one, this is the most important thing we need to look at when considering this particular question. So number one, it's basically impossible to create an application that doesn't crash ever. So what do I mean by that? As I'm sure most people who have used applications, sorry, pardon me. Oh, most people who, sorry, my stomach's a little upset. Most people who have used applications know that even the best applications built by the best developers still crash sometimes. So I'm thinking like Gmail or Facebook. So the thing about this is it's basically, there's a certain class of error. Let me write this out. There's a certain class, I don't mean that in the programming sense, I kind of just, let's say there's a certain type of error which occurs outside of what is going on within your application. So for example, I could write an app hypothetically which within the context of the application itself is basically flawless. There's no race conditions. It is perfectly threaded. When one part of the system disappears, the other parts of the system don't try to call back to it. It's, for all intents and purposes, a perfect application. As far as crashes are concerned, the problem is, let's say, for example, maybe the user has too many applications open and one of the other applications is like using up a bunch of memory in the background, and then your app goes to try and use some memory or something like that, and then it crashes because literally the operating system ran out of memory, even though you've configured it. So what I'm basically talking about here is there are certain type of error which occurs outside of what is going on within your application. So you can think like OS errors is basically what I will group this together as, but we don't even need to say that these only happen on the OS. Like maybe through some freak accident in the actual friggin' CPU of your phone or device, just through some freak accident, 1 0 got changed to a 1 in some location in memory, and that somehow caused your application to basically shit itself. Like, there's a certain, the point I'm trying to get at here is there's a certain class of error which we really just can't, we don't even really need to even try to solve it if it's something that's so insane like those particular scenarios. So I'm going to call these kind of like OS errors. We can also kind of consider them as edge cases. Just extreme, totally extreme circumstances. Maybe if the user uses the app for like 6 months, one of these errors happens like once. This happens with every application I've ever used. I really can't think of an application that's like decent sized and made by very good programmers that doesn't at one point or another crash, because that's basically just the result of working with a computer, is that if a computer's logic or procedure is broken for whatever reason, it stops working. So hopefully that point is pretty clear. So we actually can't create a perfect application. However, the question becomes, how do we reduce the number of potential errors which can occur within our application? So this is something we can strongly influence. So this is really what I'm going to focus on here, are the, what's that supposed to say? The question. So this is really what I'm going to focus on here. So there are other classes of errors or types of errors which are totally avoidable. And so those are the most important errors that we need to take care of. So if you've deployed your application, it's running out of memory all the time, you're getting null pointer exceptions all the time, or even part of the time. What's another case? You've got race conditions. So for example, you've got one component working with some state, and then another component changes that underlying state at the same time. You've got stuff like that going on, issues with concurrency. So we can really do a good job of covering those errors. The problem is it's pretty difficult. This is what I like to call big boy or big girl programming. Big is in older, it's like an expression, adult programming, so to speak. This is not the kind of stuff you want to worry about when you are an absolute beginner. So what the hell am I talking about? How do we solve those particular errors? So in a general sense, what we're going to do is we're going to start by talking about like a visual way to, and a different paradigm for representing an application. So what I have here is basically supposed to be analogous. There we go. It's basically supposed to be analogous to, it could kind of represent a whole computer system. It's probably a better representation of just one part of a computer system, maybe one feature. And basically what we have here, so we have MLV. M stands for model. So we're thinking model stuff, databases, network, services. L stands for logic. I could have called this presenter. I could have called this controller. I kind of want to just get away from those names for now because they're just not really, they tend to add more confusion than practicality. And then we have V, which stands for just generic view. That one's totally unambiguous. This is user interface, this layer here. This could be a presenter, it could be a view model, it could be a controller, whatever. This is something to do with storing data and retrieving data and maybe manipulating data, but nothing to do with user interface. So the way that we can essentially come close to creating a perfect system, I'm going to blow your mind right now, is if we are able to model every potential event which every part of our system may produce. So when I say event, I mean mouse click, or events can, we could like reestablish a network connection, but in the view I'm mostly thinking mouse clicks or user interaction. And then events from the model could be I successfully retrieve a document or a record, no document or record was found, or we have an error. So this could represent, say, the local database, and this could represent the remote database. They could represent two totally different backend services that have nothing to do with each other, but maybe our middle class, our logic class, still needs to talk to both of them in order to do something. So if we model our program, basically in an event-driven architecture is kind of what this is as far as I'm aware. I'm not really big on buzzwords, but to me, if event-driven architecture means anything, it means this. If we model all the potential responses or events from every part of our system, and we write tests to verify what the logic classes do with these events. So test, big point here, testing. We'll get into that in a moment. Then, so if the whole system models all events except for those extreme edge cases I talked about a moment ago, and it's every single potential event stream, so events can have different streams. If we test every potential event stream from end to end, and we model every potential event, and all the tests pass, and they're well formed, you have a perfect application. The closest thing I believe anyone can hope to get to, any human can hope to get to a perfect application, is when every potential event which can occur in the system is modeled, and all of those events and how to respond to them, the decisions we make based on those events, are also modeled and tested. So that's the key point here. Hopefully that makes sense for people. So before I move on, I'm going to show you what this actually kind of looks like in code, so you have like a more concrete implementation-based perspective of what I'm talking about here. So let's go to, so this is actually PosTrainer, link in the description box below. And it is Java, but that it should still work fine for the purposes of this talk. So what I want you to think of in the class I'm looking at right now, I'm looking at a presenter test. So this is basically a test for one of these, say for example, middleware classes, which is what a presenter is. It's a logic. It makes decisions, basically. It doesn't store state. It doesn't draw the view ever. It makes decisions. So these, so these things here, the view, the alarm source, and the alarm manager represent, it's really difficult to be my own producer. I wish I had like or not producer, what do you call that? I don't know. Yeah, I think producer is actually correct. So what the hell was I saying? So this is the view, the mock view. This is alarm source. This is alarm manager. This is the presenter, and I'm writing a test for this presenter. For those of you who are wondering why tests are amazing, this is the actual, one of the actual reasons here. Okay, so hopefully that visually makes sense. So then I have basically a unit test. So we're testing the real presenter, but fake versions of the other things, the event producers. And then I model every potential event. Why does it unselect automatically? God, that's weird. It's not really how select is supposed to work. There we go. Sorry, that was very bizarre. I think my mouse is malfunctioning. So I model every potential event or event stream or series of events in some kind of unit test. So I model the, say for example, the success case. Sometimes empty is a perfectly valid response. Maybe the alarm just doesn't exist in the database. And then we have situations where there's exceptions. So that is just another way of modeling these circles. Know what I mean? And if you look through this whole class, you will see that I basically try to model every potential event which can occur. Alarm successfully deleted. Alarm unsuccessfully deleted. On settings icon clicked. So we've got view events. We've got when user tries to add more than 5 alarms. I've modeled that because I don't want the user to be able to add more than 5 alarms. Do you see where I'm getting at here? And most importantly, at least last time I ran this class, all tests pass. So hopefully that should give you an idea of how to drastically improve the integrity of computer systems. So the first thing you need to do is you do need to create a modular architecture. You need to separate these things out for no other reason than you need to make them less complicated to test. That's like one of the main benefits of a separated architecture. There's plenty of other benefits, but if you do testing at all, follow some separated architecture, follow separation of concerns. Secondly, if you've modeled every potential event, which you can miss events, that's one issue. That's why it's hard to achieve perfection. But if you are reasonably certain you've modeled any potential event from the view, the model, the whole thing in a test or a construct, and you've tested it, then you can basically be certain that you have the closest thing to a perfect application that anyone could reasonably write. So anyways, that is my opinion on this topic. I do actually want to I'll make a video hopefully this week sort of diving into this a little bit more, but I wanted to share my initial thoughts on this question because it's a very important question. As a perfectionist, I've thought about this a lot, and this is actually like one of the most, to me, the most powerful ways to think of an application ever is thinking of it as events, basically. Events, and so event producers, event consumers, event producers, event consumers. Okay, anyways, I'll move on, but hopefully that was useful. All right, I'm just going to run a quick commercial break, and then we'll get either to, probably to the next question that was sent in. So here we go. Let's try and get this done rapid fire. Okay. Okay, here we go. So let's see here. So what I'm going to do, so I'm going to answer a quick question, and then after that, another viewer sent in a question in the form of, this viewer would like me to take a look at one of their repositories and to just basically give my initial thoughts and feedback on that. So we'll answer just one of the current comment questions, and then we'll go back to another pre-answered question. And I'll try to stick around maybe a little longer today because we have so many questions. But yeah, let's get started with this. So just give me a moment to pull up the repository. And this question is from Omar in the chat here. Okay. And let me just check out. Okay, so based on the comment, so I've just a big caveat here. I have not looked at this code before. I don't know what I'm about to look at. So, you know, as the viewer, bear with me. I'm reviewing some person's code. So the question is basically, could I review the code and kind of give some feedback on it? And another part of the question is, would I hire Omar if I was an employer? I guess based on the code. So I'll try to address those two questions. Sorry, I don't know how I did it, but we're going to do that in a moment. I'm going to answer the question in the chat first. My brain just totally gapped that I was going to answer a question before that. Okay, so first, this is a relatively quick one. So, oh, here we go. I have like 50 windows open. You'll have to bear with me here. Okay, so this question is from Astha. Astha or Asta asks, okay, so Asta asks a question. This has been a popular topic lately, and I guess for good reason. So which is the best library for dependency injection in Android and why? So I'm going to answer this one pretty quickly. Normally I would really ramble about this, but so number one, which is the best? I would argue Dagger 2. Why? So Dagger 2 is the most mature and well-developed DI framework I've ever seen. Admittedly, I only started programming in 2013, so maybe some old people are like, oh, Juice is better or something. GUIC is another tool, but whatever. Dagger 2 is the most mature and well-developed DI framework I've ever seen. It conforms to the JSR 330 specification. We like to see tools that conform to specifications. So what is this thing here? It's basically a group of developers getting together and saying, so I believe this is like a stand-in for just dependency injection. Maybe I'm not entirely correct here, but it has to do with the inject annotation and dependency injection in Java, essentially. That's where the J comes from. I don't recall exactly what the SR is, whatever. I don't really care about little annoying code words. So a specification is essentially when a whole bunch of developers get together and say, this is how you should do this. So Coin and Codeine, which are also, so Coin and Codeine are, say, Kotlin options for Android. They don't conform. This is seriously the biggest reason. This is the biggest reason why Dagger 2 is the best. All things barring, Dagger 2 generates its code at compile time. This means no reflection. We don't really like reflection. I won't go into too much detail here, but we don't. This is amazing. So I could ramble for a while about the benefits of like compile time code. There's a lot. So just to answer your, if you want to ask I can go into more detail later, but this is like the main reason is that it generates its code at compile time. So do I have a project? I do have a project here which uses Dagger, and let me see if I can pull up something that Dagger generates. Yes. Let's do that one. So what I just did is I pulled up a class which was generated by Dagger at compile time, and then you can actually see how your dependency injection works. What is the actual code that makes it work? A lot of other tools does this stuff behind the scenes and with reflection. Those are both not really things we like. So that's just a really key point there. Anyways, so that is why I believe that Dagger 2 is the best dependency injection framework for Android, and why I believe it to be so. So hopefully that answers your question. Okay, let's get back to the code review. Okay, so this is Omar's repository. I'm noticing right off the bat that Omar is not concerned about trademarks or copyrighted names, but that's okay. I don't think they're actually going to care, but you know, just be aware of that, Omar, that you got to be careful with certain keywords. Hopefully you're not using those terms in the published application, or maybe this isn't a published application. Anyways, just a little important point for you to note. Okay, so presumably that it just uses these APIs is what I would gather. So what I'm going to do here is Omar basically said it's model view presenter plus tests. So what I'm going to focus on here is I'm going to focus on how Omar achieves model view presenter. And that's kind of where I'll leave this, because I could kind of go all over the place here, and my natural tendency is to do that. So I'll try to keep my brain focused on that specific part. So firstly, we'll go into the app module. I'm actually going to check out build Gradle just so I know what kind of libraries we're talking about here. Okay. Okay. Looks reasonable. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, I'm just looking. Okay, so right off the bat, this is where I like to start with any new application after I've looked at their Gradle setup. So first and foremost, what do we have here? So we've got a main activity, save photos, show photos, login UI, DI. Okay, so this looks roughly like a combination of package by feature and layer, which I do like to see. So you have a good package structure. If it's working for you, then I would definitely keep doing what you're doing regarding the package structure. That looks good. Okay. Here's what I'm wondering. How do you set up Dagger? Okay, so maybe you're using... This is interesting. This is not something I'm used to seeing, all of these methods in main application, but you might have this thing set up in a way where that makes sense. I don't quite know yet. I'm a little curious about how you're using application because I don't normally see much other, like it's one thing to see like initializing libraries like this kind of thing. And Dagger 2, I don't see any Dagger stuff in here, so that's slightly confusing. So maybe we'll figure out why that is as I look through. I did notice you have, okay, so main activity I'm going to assume is like a root activity for several. Views. Okay, this looks really weird. I'm going to be honest, this looks really weird that you're logging. I'm trying to understand what this is all about because, so here's the thing. So here's like a general rule of programming. So what you have is you have activity should kind of be thought of as like a sub module almost. That's not really the right term, but like a smaller thing that sits within the activity. And generally you don't want the smaller things that sit inside of a bigger thing to be talking to the big thing too much, especially telling it what to do. So there's one thing if we have like Dagger 2, which I don't see any dependency injection here. It's one thing to like call get application component. It's one thing to call something like this, but to have your activity itself responsible for telling the activity what to do, I don't really like that on principle. Again, I'm trying to figure out if you have a good reason for doing that. If you do have a good reason, Omar, please let me know, but that seems really bad. Yeah. Especially, let me see, you don't make a, no, that's okay. All right. Let's go to save photos. Now, I'm not saying you're doing a horrible job here. I'm not like, don't get me wrong. I'm trying to give you useful feedback. I'm not trying to say you're a crappy developer. You're doing a great job. So that's fine. But let's go to, so this is saved photos. So presumably this is like a list of photos you can look at. Okay, we've got an adapter. Yep. Okay, recycler view, cool. Yeah, this looks reasonable. So you've got a view here. Is this a fragment? What is your view? No, that's an interface. So one little point. This is a small point, and this is more just to do with legibility. One thing, I guess, if I was inside of an IDE, I would actually be able to tell easily. But sometimes it's kind of nice to name your interfaces or abstract classes with a different naming convention. I'll often call them like contract, or I'll name an interface. I might want to name this thing, say, I saved photos view, so prefixed with a capital I, and that just stands for interface. And then the thing which implements the interface would be like saved photos view impl. I don't really do that in the front end so much. That's more of a back end thing, but I might like to see some little way of differentiating interfaces with concrete classes, but that's very nitpicky. Let's see, presenter, on destroy, setup injection. You have a very interesting way of using dependency injection, I will say that. So it gets get component. Okay, I really don't like this. Okay, so let's, yeah, so this is a major point we have to go over. All right, so Here's a main goal of dependency injection. The class which has components injected into it should not have, or should have the least amount possible. Any idea how those components are actually injected? So what I mean by that, I really need to look at your dependency injection. I'm going to come back to this because I really need to look at how you actually do dependency injection, because I'm a little confused. So you do it based on feature, so show photos. Okay, what do you actually do here? So module. Okay. In isolation, this looks fine. Okay, the last thing, let's look at a presenter, because I think that will really show, oops, that's again the, oh, you are doing the impl, you do have the impl naming convention. Sorry, I didn't notice that before. And that's totally fine, as long as there's some way of differentiating them. Sorry, I shouldn't have rambled about that. I didn't even notice that you were following that. So you're not... you're not really doing Dagger 2 properly, Omar. This is interesting. So let me think, how can I approach this? Yeah, I would need some more time. I need more time to really look at this, because there's things you're doing which seem very strange. Like, I want to know what... which class calls this activity and asks it for an instance of the main application, main app.get. So you get the components. Okay, sorry, my brain's going haywire here. Oh, where's he? Sorry, application. Okay, I think I see. What I'm going to suggest, Omar, is check out the most recent Java app I have that will demonstrate things. Would be POS Trainer here. Link in the description box below. The way you have your Dagger 2 setup implemented you're not even really using it. How can I say it? Suffice it to say, okay, let me show you how I think Dagger 2 should be arranged. I don't want to say really strongly you have to do it my way. The first thing I see is you don't have any inject annotations in your presenter. So you are technically still doing dependency injection because you are passing the dependencies, but you're not using Dagger 2 properly to achieve constructor injection. And you're not using field injection, which is a fancy way of saying I don't see add inject anywhere, so you're not really... That's an issue. So how I typically lay things out, and again, this does change a little bit based on, there's no single way to build Dagger that works with every application, but there are patterns which you can follow. So what I would suggest, like for example, if I open up my application class, yes, it does do things. I'm not sure. This thing might have changed since I last looked at it, so just bear with me if you see this stuff. Huh, guess I deleted a semicolon. You can do like initialization stuff in activity. And did I just act like an idiot? Okay, this is the old way I used to do this. So it does the thing basically that you're doing, but it does it in a different way. So the presenter has the inject annotation, and then what we do is, where does this get created? So this would be alarm list fragment. Yes. Now the thing about this is this isn't actually how I configure Dagger exactly accurately now, because this is an older project. I wanted to show you something Java because you showed me a Java project. But suffice it to say, the presenter should be injected. Its fields, the stuff it needs to work with, should typically be injected through constructor injection. You're allowed to, like, for example, I don't actually do this anymore with, this is kind of a bad, it's suboptimal to actually ask the application component for these components. Instead, what you want to do is, do I have a single recent project? You need to configure the activity injector. Let me see if I can find some code that demonstrates what the hell I'm talking about. And then I'll have to move on because I've probably been talking about this for like 20 minutes. Okay. Tutorial. This is actually probably a better example, Android REST tutorial. This is also Java. And what I want to, hopefully, if this thing is more up to date. Did I open the wrong activity? Possibly. Okay, I'm not actually sure if this thing uses the Android injector either. No, it doesn't. Okay, I'm sorry, man. I don't really have any code I can... Which project of mine actually... Oh, it's the room tutorial. My bad. As you can see... So, anyways, as you can see, the thing about Dagger is that it's really complicated and it's difficult to do it optimally. So... what I'm going to say to you, keep doing what you're doing, but either check out this repository, so this one, room demo, and this one should use the new has activity injector, I believe. Let me just pull up an example. List should hopefully have it. And does it on create? Ugh. Chris, I'm trying to tell you how to do something differently, and I don't seem to be able to find exactly what the hell I'm talking about in my own code. How embarrassing is that? Okay. One second. I'm going to open up a project in Android Studio, which I haven't posted publicly, and then we'll have a quick look at that, and then we'll move on. So it's going to lag for a minute while I open it, and we'll see. Okay. Please tell me this one has exactly what the hell I'm talking about so I can actually show you what the hell I'm talking about. No, it doesn't. Okay. I'm going to just send you to a series of repos which you should look at, and that's how you should base your Dagger 2 dependency injection implementation on. And we'll just have to move on from there. So check out Android architecture blueprints, GitHub, Android architecture components, GitHub. Look at how they set up Dagger 2. Notice that they use this thing called has activity injector or has fragment injector. That is the way that you can basically avoid. This is what we're trying to avoid. We really, which one is this? Is this the activity? We really want to avoid this stuff. Also, I want to see an inject annotation here. I want to see the presenter injected. Oops, I'm an idiot because I'm in full screen mode. Sorry, let me just redo that. This is what we don't want to see. This is the activity, and I would like you to do it like they do it in these repos here. And the reason for is just a principle of dependency injection is that you don't really want your dependency injection implementation bleeding into codes which aren't bleeding into classes which aren't responsible for creating things. Oh, what a mouthful. Okay. Secondly, let's try to see an inject annotation for the presenter. The presenter should be injected into this class. I don't think it is. What do you do with your presenter? So you say, when do you create it? Oops, that's not F. Really? Wow. Sorry, just give me a moment here. What is presenter dot? Wow. Okay. Yeah, my mind just equals blown right now, so you'll have to forgive me. I really need to look at this code again. Oh, here. Okay, there we go. Okay, this is what I was looking for. Okay, this is just not the way to do dependency injection really at all. This is the thing I was really looking for here. So you need to rework. This is not really the purpose of dependency injection. I shouldn't see like an assignment statement, essentially. There shouldn't be an assignment when I'm creating the presenter, for example. The presenter's instance should come from the dependency injection framework. I'm going to shut up about that because I just talked for like 30 minutes about that. But hopefully there was some things in that that you learned from. Would I hire you as a junior developer? Absolutely, I would hire you. All right, hopefully that answers your question there. All right, hopefully we still have people watching too. Okay, I'm just going to clear that out. And let's get reoriented. So just going to run a quick commercial break and then we'll get back to more questions. Okay. All right. I really hope that rambling was useful for people. You know, when I jump into code that I've never seen before, it's kind of like a puzzle. So I kind of need to explain about it as I'm trying to understand what's going on, and that can be a little bit difficult. But hopefully, I gave everyone some useful tips there, and you know, especially Omar. Thank you for sharing your code. Much appreciated that we were able to share it with everyone. And please don't interpret anything I said to you as me being mean or anything. I'm just trying to help you out as much as I can. So let's get started here. Ansh asks, all right, any tips on how to keep up with the technology? Any other day, some libraries, architecture, etc. comes out, and whatever I try to learn, I've got to start it again from basics. So I'm sorry, Ansh. There's no easy answer here, man. The honest truth is that you basically, if you actually want to keep up with the technology, you need to be learning like every day. That's truly the most difficult thing about programming, is that in order to be a really good programmer, you need to always be using the best tools to get the job done properly. Actually, that's not entirely true. In order to always be up on the latest technology, you can be a great programmer without frameworks, but to a degree, like actually Uncle Bob talks about doing most of the things he writes, he doesn't use frameworks. Like I don't think he even uses Mockito. I could be wrong, but I don't think he likes those kinds of things. Anyways, whatever. Yeah, the honest truth here is you have to study every day. And this is seriously, this is why most programmers, this is seriously the difference between, I don't want to be mean, but a good programmer and a bad programmer. So a good programmer is always learning, always figuring out new ways to solve problems, always asking the question, how can I improve my code? And the decision always comes down to, if there's a new technology which will evidently help you write better code, you got to learn it. And the only way to do that is you got to study every day, because there's so much to learn. I understand where you're coming from. Like, it does suck. Like, a perfect example is I was trying to explain how to do Dagger 2, how to write a Dagger 2 implementation properly. Well, unfortunately, in most of the applications which I had written before, Dagger 2 did not have the activity and fragment injectors, which allow you to basically do constructor injection on activities and fragments, which is really, that's where you want to be, at least with dependency injection. But because it changed, I didn't have the code to even explain what I think is the right way to do it. So this is the problem of programming, is you got to learn every day. So, Amit, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. I'm not going to try to be mean here, but so Amit asks this and then spams the comments by saying please, 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 which is fine. I know you're not trying to irritate me, but okay. I need you, Amit, or however I pronounce it, I need you to understand what exactly you're asking me to do right now. You're saying, can you please create an app from scratch using concepts like RxJava 2, retrofit, data binding, Dagger 2, and model view model architecture. So there's a couple problems with this. I don't have time to do this. I am a very busy person. I don't have time to just randomly just whip up an app in like a couple seconds or a couple of days or a couple of hours. To build a good application takes at least several days. And when I say days, I mean like 12-hour days. That's been my experience anyways. Yeah, it can have retrofit too. I can write something with retrofit. I don't actually like data binding very much. There's lots of reasons to do data binding, and it's better than, say, the find view by ID boilerplate, but I actually don't like putting logic and a bunch of crap in my XML files, which is the main reason why I don't do data binding. It's a great idea, I just don't like filling my XML files with stuff like that. That's not necessarily a huge... I'm not saying don't learn data binding, I'm saying I don't like to use it. And then you've got Dagger 2 and Model View View Model. So you're basically, you want me to just do all of that, which if I were to actually do this from scratch would take, you know, probably at least about a week to build, to do it properly, if the app's of any scale. And so that's an entire week I've spent dropping everything I have to do every day in order that you get this app that you're looking for. So unfortunately, I'm not trying to be mean here, but no matter how many times you ask me to please do this, it's not going to happen because I literally can't do that for you. So anyways, I'm gonna make a video about this, but there's certain ways to ask questions and to ask for help that, you know, are going to be responded to better than other ways of doing so. And this is a common problem I see a lot, and it's something I plan on talking about soon. So anyways, not trying to make you feel bad, but Amith, no matter how many times you say please, I am not going to do this thing for you because that would be very detrimental to my personal well-being to spend all the time doing that. So anyways, let's move on. What are my professional, financial, and personal goals for 2019? And could I give a sneak? I guess I could. I will try. There's a lot I can't actually talk about, unfortunately, but I guess you did specifically say that I could kind of sneak peek about them, so. So Robert asks, what are your professional, financial, and personal goals for 2019? Could I give us some hints or a sneak peek about them? So first, you know, financial goal number, yeah, let's write it like that. So financial goal number 1 is just to be financially independent. So at the moment, fortunately, a good amount of my income is just from my own stuff, is my own creation, but I still need to do a bit of freelance work. I still have to do this and that to pay the bills. I would like for that not to be the case by 2019, but we'll see. I don't really know. So that'd be my financial goal. As far as like personal goals, I have so much I'm doing right now. I'm writing a large, very technical book about Kotlin. I work on that almost every day. I am still working on a project which has been in the works since May, but it's just been unfortunate because I got totally sidetracked because of a horrible job I was working, and the other people I'm working on this application with are also really busy people. So we're finally this week, actually, that's why I wasn't able to better prepare for today's episode. This week I finally got to go back to that thing and just start working on that again. So I'm building a commercial application with a couple other developers, and I'm trying to keep regular videos going, at least 1 video a week and 2 streams a week. And then I'm also trying to grow other things, like I'm trying to hopefully for like the 20th week in a row, I will be able to find the time to start writing Medium articles. And I don't really do anything but work, man. That's all I do. Anyways, yeah. So those are basically my financial personal goals. Also, health has been a huge goal. So I'm trying to slowly lose a little bit of body fat. I know I'm not that fat, but I was quite fat when I was a kid. And but I want to put on a little bit of muscle at the same time. So that's kind of my main personal goal. It has been working a little bit, but my diet, the diet I'm on right now supports those goals, and it keeps my brain super sharp. So that's been a huge, I have met my health goals, which I'm super excited about. I have a diet which works really well, which I never had before. And food is not something that is a major inconvenience right now. So that's a huge goal already met. I guess that's probably about everything interesting. I have a quick let's see here. Should be able to do this one relatively quickly. So Naline asks any tips to handling design related parts of the app, like animations, view transactions. I'm not sure if I have anything I can show you right away. Here's what I do. So start either on paper or in some design illustration tool. So you could think like, again, I don't actually really use these very often, but GIMP, or I'm sure there's tools for building app UIs. There's definitely illustration tools out there specifically for UI design. I like to work on paper. I'll try to find an example which isn't current proprietary designs, so this may take a moment, but let's see how well I do. This could take a moment. Okay, whatever, good enough. It's not an ideal thing, but okay, so I like to start on paper. For every feature or view, I will draw it out like that. Okay, now when you're doing animations is one of the things you asked. When you're doing animations, the key to designing them and getting them, the key to designing them basically is you treat an animation as a series of views transforming over time. So if I couldn't find something where I show an animation and how I would draw it, but what I would do is let me just, here, I'll draw a really quick example here. I hope everyone's having fun, by the way. It's been a really rambly, all over the place episode, but a lot of really interesting topics today. I'm super excited. Okay, where's my pen? So let's say we want to make a loading circle animation, which is pretty common. It's called an indeterminate progress bar, for example. And I want it to be a rotating circle, or part of a circle that rotates. And I'm going to screw this up horribly, but it should hopefully serve my purposes well enough. So the way you can, an easy way to think of and design animations is to understand that ultimately what you're doing is you're taking some visual element, like a semicircle, and you're bringing it through a series of states. Whoops. You bring it through a series of states over time. So if I were to loop these different random disparate images, you would get something like a rotating circle. At least that's what the user thinks. So this is my main suggestion for designing animations. Make sure you know a lot of tools only require the initial state and the final state, where to start and where to get to. But if you get stuck, represent every potential state of the animation on paper, and then you know sequentially what do I need to do to get from there to there. Looks like I'm writing in some weird alien language here. Anyways, yeah, hopefully that helps you out. Admittedly, I'm not an expert in animations, but that's how I approach them. There's a lot of tools out there. There was a tool, oh, what was this tool called? I just heard of it. It's by a company. Come on, brain. I don't think it's literally a tool that makes animations really easy. Let me see if I can find it. I haven't actually used it, but my friend Devore mentioned it. Lottie, that's what it's called, isn't it? Yeah. I haven't used it, but Lottie, full disclosure, I have not used it yet. I just heard about it, but Lottie might be a really awesome animation library, but I have no idea how it works. I just heard from 2 developers that I like and respect that it's a good tool, and I trust them. So maybe consider checking out Lottie as well for implementation-specific help, Android-specific help. Okay, what are we at here? Long episode today. This is not a question, but this needs to be brought up anyway. Okay. Where is my mouse cursor? There we go. Okay. One of the consequences of having the big notepad window open is that I lose where my mouse cursor is all the time. Anyways, first world problems. Okay, so Maiko Sarah comments, I stuck all of my code in a single activity and it's called the kitchen sink pattern. Actually, there's a couple names for this. This pattern's already been named. That is a good name. That made me chuckle, but we typically refer to this as a God activity, as like the pattern. And then you can actually base your entire application on what's called the big ball of mud architecture. I like this one quite a bit. The big ball of mud architecture. I've seen people do that, and it's really funny to it's funny to watch, funny to look at. Anyways, moving on. So Omar mentions that So this is, again, just to follow up really quickly, Omar mentions that he's not using, I'll just paste it in here. I just need to make sure, just a technical point to clarify. So Omar says it's for the purpose of testing that I don't use the inject annotation. That's not a valid reason, and the reason why is that when you want to create your, say for example, so this, let's see here, this presenter is injected into the fragment, and its own constructor has an inject annotation, and there is nothing stopping you where's the test? There's nothing stopping you from using the constructor of the presenter without Dagger 2 in your test classes exactly as you see here. So this, you can most certainly test your classes which have inject annotation, just so we're absolutely clear on that point. What else have we got? Oh, Grohek mentions that or in the line, which is not this individual's real name, mentions that he was speaking specifically of transitions, I guess the transitions API. I did that like once in the original version of Catalyst, and I'm really beyond that. I'm going to be doing some more UI stuff soon, but for now, I'm not the one to ask about Transitions API. I used it once like 2 years ago. I can't remember the answer to this question. I don't think so. I could actually use a hand from other developers if this is exactly true. So ask, is it okay to use a constraint layout within other constraint layouts? So if I'm wrong about this in the chat, please do let me know. I believe how this works. So here's the thing. I think as a general rule, you want to avoid that. I do think you're allowed to nest them. So the thing about it is, so you want to, one of the whole purposes of having a constraint layout is to have the goal of constraint layout primarily, sorry, give me a moment, is to achieve a flat view hierarchy. And so essentially kind of the whole idea with constraint layout is that you're trying to avoid nesting layouts. And the reason why you want to avoid nesting layouts is it can really exponentially increase the time that it takes to draw the layout, which on most modern phones isn't noticeable, but there's actually, it's an exponential equation. So if you nest many layouts together, you will actually reach a point where it can like really screw your app up. But I believe you have to nest, I only recall reading about how that works with linear layout. And so when you nest linear layouts and use weight, the calculation becomes exponential. So it only starts to be an issue, I believe, around, I don't know, 7 or 8 nested linear layouts. But so are you allowed, is it okay? I don't want you to ever do that unless you have a good reason to. I can't actually remember. I think you're allowed to. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you're allowed to. To be honest, I can't recall exactly what the performance impact is when you do that, but I'm quite sure you're allowed to. One thing for containers, I would suggest using frame layout. So what do I kind of mean by that? What I'll typically do in applications is, let's go to, what am I looking at here? So activity calculator. So for like root layouts, I'll usually, oh, my computer's locking up. There we go. For root layouts, like an activity, I'll typically use a frame layout, and then the actual view that goes inside will be a constraint layout, like so. And that's my general approach, but I think there are cases where you could have a nested layout within a nested layout. So I'm actually going to hop into the chat and see if anyone clarified that point for me. But yeah, I'm pretty sure you're able to do that. Okay. Anyways, let's move on. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna skip. Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, I was gonna try and clarify a question about find view by ID and to do, but it looks like Asta clarified it. Victor, my cousin Victor, we're not actually related, but if you go back far enough, we are definitely related. But Victor mentions that that I need to refactor my code. That's absolutely true. I have like 12 different old projects that I need to go back and refactor, and I don't have time to like even refactor my new applications. So that's unfortunately one of the difficulties. It's a changing landscape. Apparently, that's good to hear. Isaiah says that the review was good. I like doing that. Lambda and Kotlin. So Darius asks, can I talk about lambdas in Kotlin? Let me get back to you on that one. Because I've been working extensively with higher order functions, top level functions, extension functions, all kind of functions on Kotlin, but I don't yet understand exactly how lambdas work at the level of bytecode. Until I do that, which I'm planning to learn this month. I've got so many topics I got to cover in Kotlin. But before I answer that question, I need to understand how it works in the bytecode. Otherwise, I would be giving you just vague statements that describe it, which will be about as useful as all of the vague statements I've read about lambda statements, or lambda expressions. So I have to basically duck your question, but I'll try and re-answer it soon. I just need to understand it a little bit better. One of the things with Kotlin that I would really suggest is learn how to decompile it, and in doing so you can basically understand how things work. So sort of once they're decompiled to Java. I will talk about all of that stuff very soon, don't worry. I kind of just have to be careful what Kotlin stuff I talk about right now because I am writing a book on Kotlin. So anyways. I'll riff on this really quickly. Only answer a few more because we're almost an hour and a half here. We're way later than usual, but that's okay as long as the questions are good and I am not tired. Oops, what was your name? Darn it. Darius. Okay, so this question, so you're, let me break down what these things are. So in short, no, but that's because we're comparing different things. So MVVM is a pattern. I'll use the word pattern because it, or slash style of architecture, which has a specific set of requirements. So those requirements might be view models may not call back to views. The views actually observe the VMs. If you're wondering how that works, then I have a tutorial on that. It works through the observer pattern. What else about view model? That's really the main important thing. Beyond that, it's very similar to the others. So yeah. So you're asking, are MVVM and clean architectures equal? No. And MVVM slash MVP slash MVI slash MVC slash MVWTF, I don't care what stupid letters you use. This is my architecture. This is the one I follow. May or may not be clean. So a clean architecture is an architecture which employs certain design principles, such as SOLID. That's an acronym. Certain design principles in order, how could I phrase that a little better? It's an architecture which is designed to principles such as in solid principles. That's maybe a little more technically accurate way of saying that. So what does this mean? A clean architecture has a certain set of requirements before you can reasonably call it a clean architecture. An MVP style application doesn't necessarily have to be built in a clean way. You should, so here's the thing, you should try to observe clean architecture principles. Do try to do this with your model view model architectures, but to really answer your question in a technical way, a model view model article doesn't necessarily need to be clean. It does have to have some characteristics of this, of the concepts of clean architecture. But clean architecture is, I want you to not, I used to approach clean architecture from the perspective that it was a rigid thing. Clean architecture is not a rigid thing. It's a set of fairly rigid principles. So let me explain with a visual representation. What have I got here? Okay, so I'll show you, these are two diagrams we see a lot on this live stream. I'll actually show you the, oops. So this is a diagram of specifically what model view model basically has to look like, assuming like a 1-to-1 ratio of everything. It does change when you have multiple actors at play. But as you can see here, this is the pattern. This is what it looks like. So this is like a clean way to do that. But clean architecture, here's another, this is my model view. This one's an older, do I have a more, let's do this one. This is a better one. So this architecture here doesn't even necessarily need to conform to model view presenter, model view controller, or model view view model. But this is kind of a general way to build applications. And as long as you achieve a certain number of principles as explained by clean architecture principles, so dependencies only point in one direction, separation of concerns, there's a lot of things. I won't go into all of them because I don't have time. But if you should still try to build your stuff in a smart way. I don't know where else I can really go with that, but to answer your question specifically here, an MVVM architecture can be clean if it observes the principles, but they're not equal in the sense that they're like different things. They're different things of the same type. I understand why you're probably thinking at this like MVVM is one architecture style, clean is another, and clean is more about principles without caring so much about what it specifically looks like, whereas MVVM has a specific look to it. So hopefully that answers your question somewhat well. Okay, I'm only going to do one or two more questions here. What have we got? Sergio suggests start mountain biking. I actually hate cardio. I don't like to do cardio at all. I just like to lift weights. When I want to do cardio, I lift weights faster. Anyways, joking aside, I love to do hiking. I can hike up a mountain without taking much break. I can walk for like 6 hours straight, and it's not a big deal because I grew up in a mountainous region. But when it comes to biking and jogging and running, I hate it. I don't really do, I don't like to do that kind of cardio. Lots of people do though, so. Oh, let me get to Victor's question. Sorry, I totally forgot about your question, Victor. Let me just quickly go over the final questions to see. Thank you. That's such a wonderful thing to say. So Robert mentions, here I'll just paste it instead of sounding like I'm talking to myself. So Robert just kindly gave me some feedback here that great presentation. To be honest, I like your YouTube lives much better than some others down in the States. You are so real. Thank you. I really appreciate that. The thing is, I like to hear that feedback because I don't always know if you guys are enjoying what I'm doing here or if it's useful. And if you don't enjoy me talking at you and you're not learning anything from me talking at you, I might as well quit. So when I do hear things like that, it really does, it's much appreciated. Thank you, Robert. Okay, you know what? I'm really sorry, guys. There's still lots of great questions and comments, but I've got to leave in a moment. And there is a third question that was sent in. This one was by Victor. And so I'm going to try and answer as much of Victor's. He actually sent in several questions. I'm going to try and answer them as much as possible. And then that's going to be the end of the show for the most part. But I'm going to have to jump into that. And I'll stick around at the end if people have comments. But as far as answering more questions, that's going to be it for today because we're pretty far into this live stream at this point and my voice is getting a little raspy. Okay, let me just pull up your questions, Victor. Okay, here we go. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so for starters, okay, kurwa mać. Okay, so Victor asks, according to your model view model tutorial with Dagger live data, I would like to ask a question. You used async task in the view model to keep everything simple, and I would like to see how to make calls using RxJava in the view model. Would be nice if you could show one example. There's follow-up questions. So the first thing, excuse me, probably Victor is, I can already tell Victor has realized that here's the thing. When I make a tutorial application, if I'm trying to teach people how to use, sorry, my stomach is upset. If I'm trying to teach people how to use model view model, live data, and room, for me to then build that with RxJava, even though that's how I would suggest it, or to build it with coroutines, there are certain cases where I just don't get to build things. I can't always do a tutorial exactly how I would want to do it in production code. So as Victor has noticed in this particular application, this is very true. I use async task, which I almost never use. Yeah, that's the last time I've used async task in the past 2 years, was literally for this tutorial. I did use that just to keep it simple, so I didn't have to teach everyone RxJava, because if I teach RxJava, then that's like an hour. So I'm like, whatever, just use an async task. So Victor's asking, how can we do something like that using RxJava? So here is kind of what I would, I'll do my best to answer this question because I don't have code immediately available, but I think I can answer your question at least in principle. So, oh, and you wanted a, there's a preference for Java, so just give me one moment. You go to the right side. How do I do that? There we go. Okay, so this is POS Trainer. So again, Victor, remember you just gave me shit about having to go back and refactor my code. This code is really old, so be prepared for me to say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Let's just, I'll see where this goes, man. I'm gonna try and help you. Okay, so when you're dealing with RxJava, you need some, this is not a presenter, this is a presenter test. There we go. You're gonna need like one of these doohickeys. Where is it? You're gonna need a composite disposable. You're gonna probably need that in, so sorry, here's how I want you to think of this. Victor, basically what I want you to do is I want you to just imagine in your head that this thing says view model instead of presenter, because to be perfectly honest, that's pretty much the only difference here in most people's implementations of view model versus my implementation of presenter is that and this. What the hell? Oh, I selected it. That's why I deleted it. Sorry. Is that. You're not allowed to talk to a view directly, and it's called view model. And that is seriously what most people actually build. And then they call it a view model, and I call it a presenter. Who knows who's right? I think my name is better. Anyways. Yeah. What you need to do, so you asked about how to do this in RxJava. Step one, you need like a composite disposable. What does this big fancy thing do? It keeps track. Oh, I ruined my diagram. I can't. I'm an idiot. It keeps track of the different event streams. Yeah, it keeps track of the different event streams, the different backend things. So you need to, simply put, you need this thing which is like a, let me write this out because it's a little complicated. So steps. So 1, have a composite disposable, which is basically like this is not technically true. I'm saying conceptually it's like an array list of, it's basically, I think it's actually a map. I could be wrong, but it's like a, let's say a list of, so it would be a list of, this is where we go into La La Land because RxJava has all this jargon. It's like a list of subscriptions, subscriptions. I think that's spelled correctly. I don't think it is spelled correctly. Whatever, I don't care. So you need to keep track of your event streams. That's basically what a subscription is, kinda. The problem is we have like a subscriber, we have a subject, and then we have a subscription. I just don't want to get into all that stupid jargon. So you need one of these things to track your observer pairs, we'll say. Number 2, clear that thing. So if you're doing this in view model, I don't think you actually need to do this. So if you're, again, I don't have any easily accessible right now Java samples. Okay, so here's the thing. When your class extends view model, it is intrinsically lifecycle aware. So it shouldn't call back to a view when you've changed the orientation. So it should handle that for you for the most part. I was about to say if you're doing this in RxJava, then you need to, in stop and start, you need to, in stop particularly, you need to clear your composite disposable. That's maybe not true if you're using a view model. Whatever, hopefully you kind of understand what I'm talking about here. As a general, let's say, so let's put it this way. Maintain some list of subscriptions, which is basically a subscriber plus a subject, which this is because of RxJava is an observer plus an observable, which is said in another way, an event producer, no, an event consumer plus event producer. This is seriously all the different stupid ways that we have of talking about the same goddamn thing. This is one of the biggest problems with RxJava is A calls it a subscriber, B calls it an observer, C calls it an event consumer. When these are married together, it creates like a subscription type thing. Maintain a list of those. When appropriate, stop your RxJava apparatus from calling back to a null view. Although admittedly, I believe view model handles that implicitly if you use it. And then what's number 3? Have your data sources return, just for simplicity's sake, just have them return flowables and work with that. You can get into the completable and the other things, but just by default, probably just use a flowable, okay? Have your data sources return flowables. And then 4, many APIs are configured to return flowables instead of, all right, let's just say flowables. So this is the key part. So you're asking me, how do we do like a view model? We want to do like a model view model app properly with that view model object, and we want to use RxJava. So for example, room database can be configured, I think it's a plugin, to return flowables instead of live data. Retro, and this is like, so automatically. Retrofit can be configured again with a plugin to return flowables as well. Failing that, you just have to wrap all responses. So here's how you do this, Victor. This is the key point. You're asking me, how do I use RxJava with view model? Where is my image? And really, this is the key point here. Just make sure that your view model, anything that gets returned to the view model, is basically through RxJava. It's got to be a flowable, it's got to be an observable. And you can create those. You don't necessarily need to be leaning on, say, Room or Retrofit to do that. It's quite handy because it saves you code to write, but that's really, you have to wrap all responses in a flowable, essentially. That's, again, that's kind of a inaccurate way of describing how that works, but it's an easier to understand way of describing how RxJava works. But basically these event streams, just like the diagram I unfortunately drew and erased, need to be represented with flowables. So hopefully that answers your question. Oh, I am out of breath at this point. Well, that was a hell of an episode. We really went all over the place, and so I'll just read the final. If there's any more final comments, I will address them. And yeah, that's basically it. Okay. This one is non-technical. I already forgot your name, Darius. Darius asks, do I do a live show every night? So I do 2 live shows a week, all both at 10 a.m. UTC -7, which is an hour and a half ago. So it's actually almost noon for me. That's actually more like about 2 hours ago. On Monday and Tuesday. On Monday, live Q&A. On Tuesday, live coding. So I should actually advertise this better, but I do 2 live shows a week. So today, sorry, I screwed that up. That's Sunday, Monday. Okay, so on Sunday, I do a live stream Q&A. So the focus of the Q&A is I am a self-taught developer, and I would have benefited very greatly from someone who I could ask questions from. So that is what I try to do with this live stream, is I try to make sure that at least an hour every week, if you are a beginner or an intermediate and you have a question you would like me to try and answer, or you just want some help with things, I try to be here at this time always. This is a newer thing, but I also do live coding on Mondays. So during the live coding stream, my emphasis is on coding. It's not so much on answering questions, but I'll still try to talk about what I'm doing. And usually at the end of my coding session, I will still try and answer a couple questions. Hopefully they're related to what I just did, what I just coded. But the live coding, this is not the time to be asking me about off-topic random questions. I'll answer questions to do with what I'm working on. But yeah, so those are basically the 2 live shows a week. I should, like I say, advertise that a little better. And they're both at the same time. Yeah, it is nighttime for if you're wondering where I'm located, why I'm on an opposite. I'm in the same time zone as California, to give you a hint, although I live in Canada, which means I must live in British Columbia. I'm sure a couple of people are like, what the hell, do you live in Canada or do you live in England or Colombia? Which one is it? No, I live in British Columbia, which is a province of Canada with quite a name. It's also the best province. All the other provinces suck. I'm not actually joking. This is the best province. It's the most expensive, but all the other Canadian provinces have nothing on BC. Anyways, all right, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully that was a interesting and insightful episode for you. And I will see some of you tomorrow for some live coding action. Thanks for watching. Peace out.